In the shadowed, mist-shrouded hollows of the Appalachian Mountains, a genetic tragedy unfolded, a stark and cruel testament to the dangers of prolonged consanguinity. This is the story of the Caldwell women, born without eyes, their fate sealed by generations of isolation and incest, a story that challenges our very notions of community, tradition, and the limits of intervention. Our dark narrative commences in 1923, deep within a remote and forgotten region of Tennessee, where the mountains served not as majestic scenery, but as formidable barriers, cutting off entire communities from the advancing tide of civilization and creating islands of culture governed by their own immutable laws. It was in these lands, seemingly suspended in time and where the reach of law was tenuous at best, that the Caldwell family became the epicenter of a hereditary catastrophe. Known to the sparse local populace as the people of the shadows, the Caldwells had occupied an isolated valley since the late 18th century, far removed from any urban center. Their existence was one of profound symbiosis with the harsh landscape. They knew every spring, every deer trail, every patch of fertile soil, but remained utterly ignorant of the world beyond the ridge. Led by the iron-willed patriarch Jedediah Caldwell, the family subsisted on what they could hunt and grow, fiercely resisting any integration with neighboring communities, whom they viewed with a mixture of suspicion and superiority. Yet, the geographical isolation was merely one facet of their seclusion. A deep-seated contempt for the outside world, fueled by generations of stories about persecution and injustice, was cultivated by Jedediah. This self-imposed isolation created a perfect, toxic environment for a practice that would become their darkest legacy: marriage between the closest of relatives. Pure blood keeps the family strong, was Jedediah's mantra, a misguided belief echoed in various isolated Appalachian communities out of necessity or tradition. But the Caldwells would take this practice to extremes rarely documented in modern history, creating a closed genetic loop where recessive genes, once benignly dormant, began to express themselves with terrifying frequency. The first documented case emerged in 1925, when Marion Caldwell, daughter of Jedediah, gave birth to a girl named Eliza. The father was her own first cousin, Thomas Caldwell. The child entered the world with a disturbing peculiarity: where her eyes should have been, there were only small, empty cavities covered by a thin layer of skin. The midwife, one of the few outsiders ever permitted on the property, was horrified, later describing the birth as a sight fit for a nightmare. Yet, within the family, the condition was attributed to evil spirits, a divine curse, or even a sign of being touched by a folkloric mountain, which anything but the biological truth. This cognitive dissonance was a survival mechanism, a way to rationalize the unimaginable within their limited framework of understanding. Word of the eyeless child eventually reached Dr. William Forrester, a physician from the nearest town, a man shaped by the emerging principles of modern medicine. Intrigued and concerned, he attempted to visit the family, only to be met with leveled shotguns and stern threats. Undeterred, Dr. Forrester spent the next 5 years meticulously documenting every rumor and report about the Caldwells that came his way, creating a clandestine file that would later become invaluable to researchers. In his personal diary, discovered decades later, he wrote with prescient insight, "I am growing increasingly convinced that the Caldwell child's condition is not the result of a curse, but a direct consequence of union between individuals of nearby blood ties. Science is beginning to understand the dangers of such unions, though these isolated pockets remain in ignorance. It is a race between enlightenment and tragedy." In 1931, another birth confirmed his worst fears. Martha Caldwell, a cousin of Marion, gave birth to twins. One girl was born with the same condition as Eliza, completely eyeless. The other had eyes but suffered from severe physical deformities, including cleft fingers and a pronounced curvature of the spine. Upon learning of this new case, Dr. Forrester wrote an urgent, impassioned letter to the Tennessee Health Department, warning of a potential public health crisis, the first official mention of what would be termed Caldwell blindness. "We witness here the tragic result of isolation and ignorance," he wrote. "These children are victims not only of their physical conditions, but of family practices that perpetuate and amplify congenital defects. To ignore this is to be complicit in a slow-moving disaster." The authorities' response was tragically slow and inadequate, hampered by a deference to local autonomy and the sheer logistical difficulty of intervention. A health official sent in 1932 was similarly turned away, and the subsequent report concluded that, without direct evidence and out of respect for local traditions, no further action would be taken. This systemic failure, this unwillingness to confront an uncomfortable truth, allowed the Caldwells to continue their practices in the shadows. The Great Depression of 1934 further hardened their isolation, severing the few tenuous economic ties they had. It was in this climate of deepened seclusion that the aging Jedediah cemented their fate with a new, irrevocable decree: no family member would ever be allowed to marry an outsider. "The world out there is dying," he declared to his assembled family. "We will survive only by keeping our blood strong and pure. We are the last true people." The 1940s brought profound change to America, but the Caldwell Valley remained a world unto itself, a living anachronism. A pivotal event occurred in 1943 when a fierce storm destroyed the only bridge connecting them to the outside world. For most Caldwells, this was a blessing, the ultimate isolation Jedediah had always desired. By then, Eliza Caldwell was 18. Despite her blindness, she had developed remarkable compensatory senses, her hearing so acute she could identify individual family members by the subtle cadence of their footsteps, her touch so refined she could read the soil's texture to predict weather changes, a skill vital for their survival. But she carried a heavier burden. She had been promised in marriage to her uncle, Joshua, a union designed to strengthen the lineage and scheduled to occur within the month. It was Sarah Caldwell, Eliza's aunt and one of the few who occasionally ventured out before the bridge fell, who finally found the courage to challenge the patriarch. Having heard whispers in town about bad blood and rudimentary genetics, seeds of doubt were planted in her mind. She confronted Jedediah in his cabin. "Can you not see you are condemning more children to be born like Eliza?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and conviction. For her defiance, she was cast out from the family council. Determined to prevent the wedding, Sarah committed an unthinkable act. She fled the valley under cover of night, swimming the swollen, treacherous river to reach town, where she sought out the now elderly Dr. Forrester, her story a desperate plea for intervention. This time, the response was decisive. America was at war, and federal authority was paramount. A district attorney, armed with a new sense of governmental purpose, accompanied by state police, mounted an expedition to the Caldwell Valley. The intervention ended in a violent, tragic confrontation that left Jedediah and 2 of his sons dead. The remaining family members, including a terrified and confused Eliza, were removed from their only known home and taken for medical evaluation. The examinations revealed the full, horrifying scope of the tragedy. Of the 32 individuals rescued, 14 had significant deformities, from profound intellectual disabilities to complex heart conditions, a grim catalogue of the effects of prolonged inbreeding. A medical report from the time starkly noted, "It is as if we are observing the results of a cruel and prolonged experiment in human genetics." The Caldwell case became a notorious study in the then controversial field of eugenics, but for the women, rescue brought a complex and often painful new reality. They received basic medical care but were often placed in sprawling state institutions where treatment was dehumanizing and custodial. Eliza struggled profoundly with the sensory overload of the outside world, the familiar sounds and smells of the valley replaced by the cacophony of an institution. She fell into a deep depression, a withdrawal from a reality she could not comprehend, until a dedicated nurse named Margaret Wilson saw the person behind the condition. With infinite patience, Margaret taught her braille and mobility with a cane, offering not just skills, but a lifeline to a new identity. Gradually, Eliza began to forge a new sense of self, separated from the oppressive traditions of her family. Scientific understanding advanced rapidly in the 1950s. Dr. Harold Jenkins of the University of Tennessee identified the specific condition as congenital bilateral anophthalmia and correctly theorized an X-linked recessive pattern, dramatically amplified by generations of consanguinity. Meanwhile, a journalist named Eleanor Patterson located Eliza in 1957, now living modestly in Knoxville where she wove baskets for a living. Her interview in Life magazine, titled "The Woman Without Eyes," shocked the nation, bringing a raw, human face to the abstract genetic tragedy. Eliza's poignant words, "Many people think I was born in darkness. But I had my own form of light. What truly plunged me into darkness was finding the truth about my family resonated deeply, forcing a national conversation. The surviving women, led by the resilient Martha Caldwell, the twin born in 1931, began to form an informal support group, a sanctuary of shared experience. Martha, demonstrating remarkable leadership, collected their testimonies on a donated recorder, creating an oral history that revealed the family's dark internal mythology. Eyeless women were called inner seers, their condition venerated as a spiritual gift even as they were systematically prepared for a life of reproductive submission. This internal law was a powerful tool of control, masking exploitation with the language of destiny. The 1960s saw anthropologists like Dr. Thomas Bennett reframe the case not as a mere medical curiosity but as an extreme product of intersecting social, economic, and geographical forces. He argued that the Caldwells were a symptom of a broader Appalachian reality, where isolation bred unique cultural adaptations, some of which turned malignant. A personal tragedy struck in 1965 when Eliza, weary of being a perpetual case study and struggling with the weight of her past, took her own life. Her suicide note, which read simply, "I am tired of being an example. I just want to be remembered as a woman," forced a painful reckoning with the ethics of how the survivors had been treated by both the media and the scientific community. The 1970s brought a monumental scientific breakthrough. Dr. Michael Stern identified the specific SOX3 gene mutation responsible, a classic example of a founder effect amplified by consanguinity. This discovery was a landmark in genetic medicine. Martha Caldwell, transforming her profound pain into purpose, established the Caldwell Foundation for Genetic Awareness in 1982. The foundation focused on creating accessible educational materials for isolated communities, speaking not from a place of judgment, but from shared experience. Her powerful, eloquent testimony before a congressional subcommittee in 1983 helped secure crucial funding for rural health programs, building the bridges of knowledge she passionately advocated for. In a stunning postscript, a diary kept by Sarah Caldwell, the aunt who had escaped in 1943, was discovered in 1987. Its pages detailed the intricate theology and belief system Jedediah had constructed, a mix of fundamentalism and folklore used to justify their practices. It confirmed the survivors' stories and revealed that Sarah had tried to sound the alarm years earlier, only to be ignored. The diary added a profound layer of historical context, showing the tragedy was not one of simple ignorance but of a deliberate, ideology-driven choice for isolation. The scientific legacy continued into the 21st century, with DNA studies showing the silent dispersal of the Caldwell mutation through the Appalachian population. The story of the Caldwell women is a harrowing, multifaceted lesson on the perils of extreme isolation, the danger of dogma, and the ethical responsibilities of authority. But it is also a profound narrative of human resilience. Born without sight into a world of darkness, they ultimately found ways to illuminate the path for others. Through their courage, their suffering was not in vain. It advanced science, informed public policy, and offered a beacon of warning and hope. They teach us that even from the deepest shadows, a light of understanding and compassion can emerge, forever changing how we see the world and our place within it. You have journeyed deep into this complex and heartbreaking chapter of history, and your engagement is a testament to the power of these stories to captivate and inform. If this narrative has moved you, please let me know by leaving a comment with the words "I watched here." It is a simple way to connect and show that you value this deep dive into the past. For those who have not yet joined our community of curious minds, subscribing now is the best way to ensure you don't miss our next exploration into the forgotten corners of history. Each like, share, and subscription supports this channel in its mission to unearth powerful, true stories that deserve to be told. The mountains hold many more secrets, and we will continue to be your guide, revealing them one carefully researched chapter at a time.